What's the worst business idea you've seen someone try to execute? Idea 1. The banana pudding store. One day, my ex-BF and I were taking a stroll downtown in the city that we were living in at the time. We passed a store that was called the Banana Pudding Store, or some such. I don't remember exactly. Well, I'm sure they sell more than just banana pudding, so let's go in. You know, like how Home Depot sells more than just hardware. They sell Gatorade, candy bars, etc. There were vats of banana pudding in the display cases, and I thought, well, surely they must also sell other flavors. So I asked if I could have a chocolate pudding, and the guy politely informed me that they didn't have chocolate pudding. So I asked if they had maybe butterscotch or something else. No, ma'am, just banana pudding here. I mean, it wasn't false advertising. But surely he couldn't be selling just one single flavor in that whole shop, could he? As expected, the next time we strolled down that street a month or two later, the store was shuttered. I feel bad for him. I'm sure that the guy made great banana pudding that all of his friends and family would compliment him on and tell him that he should probably open a banana pudding shop because it was so good, but I don't think they literally meant that. Idea 2. A small family bar/restaurant that I worked for back in high school was bought by a local couple. He was a retired insurance company executive of some kind that played golf all day, and she was a stuck-up bitch of a woman that had never worked a day in her life and who looked down on all of the restaurant's employees as some sort of uneducated lower life form. The place was located in a small town, and the clientele was mostly local farmers taking their families out in the evenings, factory workers at lunchtime, and on Sunday mornings retired elderly people on fixed incomes who would mob the place after church. The restaurant up to that point was profitable. I'm sure they liked the financials they saw on paper, or they would not have invested in it. However, once they took over, they decided to improve it. There was one elderly couple in their 90s who had been coming in every Sunday morning for years who had no teeth. They always ordered the same thing: 2 hot roast beef sandwiches with mashed potatoes and extra gravy, run through a blender and served in a bowl so they could eat it with a spoon. We were now forbidden to do that since the new owner thought it looked gross and did not fit the image of their fine dining establishment, so they stopped coming in as they could not eat roast beef any other way. Beer was no longer served in bottles at the tables. If you wanted beer in the bottle, you had to go sit at the bar. At the table, it was poured into a glass before being served. Some people really did not like that new rule and stopped coming in. There were plenty of other bars in the area to grab a burger at. The first thing they did was to put an end to the overtime pay. Staff consisted of about a dozen older long-term employees that mostly lived nearby and walked to work because they could not afford cars. These people worked their tails off, some of the 7 days a week, for about minimum wage just to be able to afford their rent and groceries. Once they were told that they could no longer work 50 and 60-hour weeks to make maybe $25 a week in overtime, most of them had no choice but to quit and go find some place where they could make enough to survive. Pay them a little more? Heavens no. These are unskilled positions. The new owners found that when they advertised for new employees to fill the vacancies, they did not get the flood of applicants they expected. Waitresses, for example, were paid $1.70 an hour at the time, and cooks made $4. This was the 1980s, and the local sewing factories paid more than that to start. So they ended up hiring a bunch of their daughter's high school friends, most of which were the cheerleader crowd that did not want to do anything that involved getting dirty, like scrubbing the floors or restrooms, and none of who could ever work on nights when there was cheerleading practice or a football game, or pretty much any Friday or Saturday at all. So the place was chronically short-staffed constantly, orders came out slow, and the new owner just sat at the bar fuming instead of doing anything to help, occasionally coming back to scream at everyone to stop goofing off and speed things up. Then, when business started to drop off, they decided to remodel to attract new customers. They tore all the carpeting out of the bar area and replaced it with this ugly yellow vinyl flooring, so the working man can come in and feel at home, like regular people who never had carpet in their houses. They added a charbroiler to the kitchen and decided they wanted to add charbroil haddock to the menu. Ever tried to grill haddock? It falls apart in little pieces and looks awful. obviously the fault of the 16-year-old kids they hired to make the food. At the same time, they remodeled the bar to make it look homey to the lower classes of people. They added expensive scotch and other high-end liquors to sell to the customers, most of who were draft Budweiser and Miller drinkers. They also, as it turned out, rarely ordered quitch for lunch. The place lasted about a year. It then sat empty for about 10 years before someone new bought it, probably because they were trying to sell it for a huge profit after it was no longer an operating business. Idea 3. So my friend had an idea that she thought was brilliant. It was to take all tap water and bottle it in parks and sell it, and then use that money to pay for homeless necessities. Really good intentioned and a kind gesture. However, in my country, there are free fountains everywhere for drinking. So she spoke to our town's mayor and suggested that all of our water be put into water bottles, and then we sell them beside the water fountains. The mayor destroyed it really quickly with how it would create unnecessary waste, the amount of money you have to spend on wages to have people standing near fountains 24/7. What if people have reusable water bottles? And why doesn't she find a way to collect money for existing homeless programs? Friend got pissed and still thinks her idea is brilliant. Edit. Everyone is commenting how this is Nestle, but I don't think they're reading the post fully. The part that the mayor rejected wasn't reselling tap water. It was taking free public water in fountains, which is maintained by tax money, and then charging for the water again right beside it. It's like standing in a park selling oxygen tanks. It was also just a funny image to me to imagine entry-level workers, most likely young teens, just standing around all of our water fountains 24/7, charging for redundant and wasteful water bottles. The cost of this would be very high, and it would probably not generate enough revenue to begin to pay back the wages, let alone contribute to homelessness effectively. I think an idea could be here, but it needs a lot more work, and I think she moved on. Idea 4. Years ago, I worked as an independent contractor for this little startup called ShopBolt. Basically, the idea behind it was an app/website that would help you do your shopping. If you needed to find a good deal on a TV or whatever, or you wanted gift ideas for a special occasion, or even getting groceries delivered to you, all you had to do was shoot us an email or a message through the app, and a personal shopper would do all the hard work for you. If you were satisfied with the suggestions, we could place the order and handle returns in case you were not happy with the product. It sounds like a pretty neat idea, but the thing about it was that it was completely free. You didn't have to pay a dime to use the app, and we did not charge any sort of service fee when making an order. The way we were supposed to make money was through partnerships with hundreds of retailers where we would do the shopping. The problem with that was that our goal was to find you the best deal for what you were looking for. And a lot of times that meant places like Amazon and eBay were not partners. On top of that, we did not have many customers, and the ones that we did have rarely placed an order. I would get paid $16/hour, later $20, to basically sit around and watch TV because we would maybe get a handful of requests in a day. It was the easiest money I have ever made. There was one time period where we were busy, but that only lasted about a week. They were trying one last-ditch effort to drive sales by creating this device called Alfie, which worked like an Amazon Echo to connect people with shoppers. They literally gave away thousands of these devices, hoping that it would make a difference. It did not. Most people gave their devices to their kids for some reason, or tried to use it to ask for things like you would Alexa, but we were only allowed to handle shopping requests. After the initial buzz died down, it went back to being normal. I worked on the project for over 2 years, and I'm surprised it lasted that long, but then again, this was funded by Sears, a company known for bad decisions. Idea 5. Dude wanted to open a film and video equipment rental house in a small town. If you don't know anything about professional grade film and video equipment, it's expensive as fuck. So already the barrier to entry is incredibly high since you need to build up a half-decent inventory. Also, there really wasn't much of a film/video industry in this town. There were college and film students, but they weren't gonna cut it. Film students are usually broke, source. I was a film student. The nonsensical part is that this location problem was entirely self-imposed. He was only a couple of hours away from a major city with a ton of film, TV, and video professionals. Had he picked up and moved and got even a fraction of business there, he'd be oak. He might have had to undercut the bigger rental houses by a few percent, but some margin is better than no margin. Filmmakers will drive a few extra minutes to get a small discount, but nope. Dude was super committed to making this rental house work in his small town. He's incredibly headstrong, even though I gave him that paragraph of reasons why this might not be a great idea and how he might revise his plans to make it work. He thought I had a sense for this kind of thing, and he asked me how much it'd take to get me down to this small town to help him out with this project. I gave him a number that was a bit below market rate, but he wanted me to fully commit to this project without any expectation of a paycheck. I had shot a few things with him previously, and we had a somewhat decent business relationship on that front. But man, I'm a videographer, not a rental house owner, so I declined that offer. He didn't take it well, and he cut all ties shortly after. To be honest, I'm kind of glad he did. Last I checked, dude maxed out credit cards, is presumably in a mountain of debt, ended a decade-long relationship, developed an unhealthy reliance on marijuana to cope, and burned bridges with a ton of clients. His ambition wasn't matched by his business sense, and he was beyond saving when he couldn't objectively evaluate criticism on his business plan. Idea 6. Dude I know was a hard worker but not too smart when it came to the big picture. He always wanted to be a businessman, which, in his mind, seemed to mean wearing a suit and telling people what to do. I encouraged him to take business classes, which he never finished, tried to teach him the basics of using Excel to make expense sheets, which he got bored of, just generally wasn't interested in the long way of doing things. He went away for a while and did some contract work that meant he lived like shit for a few years and came back with mid-five figures in his pocket. He tried to get me involved in a couple of ideas, including an at-home stripper pole install, which I was able to talk him out of. Eventually, I could see his eyes glaze over when I tried to dissuade him out of risky pursuits, and he stopped discussing things with me. A little while later, he hooked up with a dude that matched his idea of a businessman. He used fancy buzzwords, dressed flashy, and inflated the importance of every activity. You weren't hanging out, you were masterminding, or some such bullshit. They ended up going around the country for meetings that involved trying to keep up with their potential partners' expensive lifestyles. The idea was to get fancy clothes from America and sell them in parts of Asia you wouldn't normally expect. They asked me if they could use my dad's contacts in my birth country, and stopped listening when I tried to explain to them the glaring holes in the plan. Last I heard, he was in debt for high five figures, but got a good job. Not sure if he's actually servicing the debt, though. Idea 7. My dad was always coming up with his idea of getting rich quick schemes or careers, but they were never well thought out. He designed a few terrible board games, spent tens of thousands on becoming a certified life coach. His plan was to teach wealthy businessmen how to improve their businesses. He has never run a business, although he did create business cards that had his first name, his last name, international on them. Wasted many more thousands on becoming a hypnotherapist. Last we talked about it, he really thought he knew how to hypnotize people. He doesn't. I asked him to hypnotize me once. I wasn't being snarky. I believe hypnotherapy can help people, although I did think his classes were a scam, and I was trying to show him they weren't worth his investment in a gentle way. Obviously, he failed to hypnotize me, but unfortunately, this only encouraged him to waste more money training. He wrote a book on parenting, which sadly he's not great at, and the introduction included a note that being a parent wasn't for everyone and you should only do it if you're ready to be responsible. It went on to say if you're not ready, you should just pull out. He really thought there was no risk of pregnancy pulling out, and that this was a totally valid and foolproof contraception on par with condoms. He also decided he would be a kayak instructor. He would have been good at this one if he had taken any sensible or logical steps towards this. His first move was not to get certified by taking a course, nor to research competitors in the area, or set up a business, or look into the cost of insurance, etc. He just bought 5 or 6 kayaks outright, and then did nothing else until he had to move and give the kayaks away. He did not live in an area that got enough tourists for the business to have worked, even if he had done everything else right. But he is great with people and very athletic, so if he had lived in a different area, he would have made a good employee instructor.